I could not imagine being in a war-torn country like Mr. Wynn was, thinking like, hey, the only thing that I can do for this kid is to give her to somebody that might be able to give her a better life than I can. I
Hmm.
would love to know, man, how does this, I know you said Steve was Vietnam War during a Christmas special, right? So how does this one kind of play? Like, how are you and Steve working this one? Was it all of Steve? Were you just laying the groundwork, like you said? But how did this one really flesh out?
I wanted to. We all. It was cool. The Christmas special was so we knew in the middle of making it. It was a couple things. The whole crew worked on it because it was the last episode of season one. It was episode 20 out of an order of 20. And so we arranged it that all the crews, normally it'd be two different teams, would be boarding, episode. We got everybody, all the artists worked on it. And
Mhm.
so there was a great sense of making something kind of extra. And it was our first special. So it had all that. There was everything about it seemed kind of unique. And so everybody just kind of got involved. And I wanted to kind of like do rewrites on it because I just wanted to be part of the writing of that show. So
Yeah.
Steve wrote the first draft, and it was kind of his pitch. But then when we were getting further into production, I wrote some of the scenes on it because for that reason, like I'd say, Steve, we got to do. There was Jamie Mitchell who directed it. Steve and I were talking about. Jamie said, "I think we need Helga to have one last kind of speech."
Yeah.
Like we have to learn that Helga's finally understood uh, that it's not about presents, it's not about getting stuff. It's about, and so she makes that speech. And I remember it was going to kind of lay a lot of pipe, you know what I mean? It was going to, the scene where Gerald talks to Arnold, they're sitting on the bench and they failed. And Gerald's telling him, hey, man, you did more than anybody. You tried as hard as you could to help Mr. Wynn, and it was written in a way that Helga would overhear them
Yeah.
and learn what was at stake, why the boots were needed. It was for Mr. Bailey so he could find Mr. Wynn's lost daughter, and he was at the Federal Office of Information, and so all that stuff had to go in that speech. And then the next thing was when Arnold goes home and he's just laying in bed, but Helga's out there and stops Mr. Bailey before he gets in the cab. Those two scenes were kind of like some important pipe that had to be laid, and Steve was like,
Yeah.
"You write it," and so I was like, "Okay." So I wrote those scenes for that reason, like to do the glue, that makes the whole story come together. The other contribution that I feel like is very me is that what I just described. Arnold goes home defeated, and you just see him laying in bed with all his clothes on, and then you just see him looking out at the skylight, and you get a flashback of that Mr. Wynn's Vietnam story.
Mhm.
Um, just to remind the audience, we're in part two. There's been a commercial break. That was a long time back in the story. So we felt like we needed to
Refresh.
remind everybody what the stakes were. And that scene's very me because it's kind of who Arnold is on a kind of a spiritual level. Like he's always trying to kind of fix things and he's worrying about stuff. And you can picture him going off and kind of being upset that, he wrecked Eugene's bike or whatever. And in this case, it was especially bad. I mean, my God, Mr. Wynn lost his daughter in the Vietnam War, and he tried and tried, but it looks like he's failed. So that scene is about Arnold literally, like his spirit is like in broadcasting out into the world. And Helga, the next thing you're going to see is Helga trying to convince Bailey to stay up all night and find my Wynn. And so that was kind of something I wanted to reinforce. Arnold and Helga have this mysterious connection,
Mhm.
like she can be like, Arnold, and then you fly across town and Arnold goes to Gerald, he goes, did you just hear something just now? And he goes, no. And the humor of that is that Arnold really is he's like the center of the universe of that show. And that was a look at that, and how his weird connection to Helga, there really are soulmates, and they're gonna kind of be together forever. So
Yeah.
that all that stuff it was early in that theory of mine, but it was why I put that scene in.
It's beautiful. And there was something that I'm pretty sure it's too far-fetched to connect dots, but there's a scene in there, and it's my favorite. It's not my favorite scene in the entire episode, but it's my favorite line probably in the entire series of Hey Arnold. And it's Helga after she overhears, Arnold and Gerald talking, and then she's like, "Oh no, not another moral dilemma." That
Yeah,
line, I there's something about that, and it reminds me of for the life of me, I can't think, but it reminds me of a Chuck Jones cartoon, an episode of one of the Chuck Jones shows that he
I,
directed.
I I've borrowed many things from Chuck Jones.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what it was. It was just like the first thing I thought of was like this is like a and I love Chuck Jones. Bob Clampett's always been my guy when
Mhm.
it comes to the Warner Brother directors. But it just like it felt I was like this feels like a like it feels just like a Looney Tune gag, and it was something that every time I see it, I get a little bit of a chuckle. The first time I saw it in a long time, I got a belly laugh out of it. I was like, ha, that's awesome, man. Helga's such a phenomenal character. I mean, she's one of the, there's not one character in here that I don't love. I mean, if you're supposed to hate him, even with Harold, man, when Harold goes and he steals stuff and he has to work in the butcher shop and then he tries to steal stuff
Yeah,
against, there's redeeming qualities in everybody, and the pigeon.
yeah, we were definitely setting out to redeem everybody.
Yeah. It's just like how you guys put a bow on all of these characters, man. It made you want more, but it felt like if it ended with this episode with this character, you'd be like, okay, I get what they were doing with this character. I get this character story. I understand why he's interconnected or why she's interconnected, why she does this. It just you guys did. I keep telling you this. You guys did such a great job with this show, man. I mean, it was perfect for me.